Okay, we are live for episode 214 of Trek Live. How you doing this morning, Dan?
Doing great. Excited to talk about the conclusion of season 3 of Lower Decks, and probably get into some rankings here, and also some probably early discussion about the Prodigy and what that brings to the next show. So, lots to talk about.
Yeah. We haven't really talked Lower Decks on Trek Live in much of a way at all. So this should be interesting. I know we've talked off air, obviously, about some of the episodes. So I think we know a little bit about what each other thinks about some of them, at least. But I think it'll be fun to look at the season as a whole. Maybe pick some favorite episodes, like you said. If you're ready to rank, by all means. I'm loving the idea of jumping into that. And yeah, this is also 5.5 years of Trek Live. This is the first time my little background has shifted.
Yeah, that's true. Exactly.
You changed like 5 or 6 times, 7 times maybe. But I've been pretty consistent. I was pretty much in the same location the whole time. Just rearranged a little bit and kind of flipped the room around. So it's in progress, work in progress for sure. I'm hoping to get some Star Trek like poster art and things behind to spruce it up a little bit in some way. But definitely good and happy with the change. I think before we get into Lower Decks, though, we should, since it's been a couple weeks since we've been here, and I know we're both into season 3 of TOS, which is a big deal. Maybe touch on where we are in our rewatches, how far along. I think, unless you watched something late last night or early this morning, we might be exactly aligned with
We're lined up.
where we're sitting.
Yes, we are lined up. So, like Bill said, we're going through into season 3 of the infamous season 3 of the original series. So I think it's episode 8, right?
For the World is Hollow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we are. So I mean, some notables here: Spectre of the Gun, Paradise Syndrome, Enterprise Incident. There's definitely some notables kind of at the beginning of this season. I think there's also some middle of the road episodes that aren't. I think this is where, TOS starts to show its kind of not so original writing, and I think at that same time the performances definitely suffer
A little bit, yeah.
with guest stars and even with some of the main casts. So yeah, really cruising along, doing our best to stay lined up and being able to talk about a few episodes here, but that's where I am. My rewatch.
Yeah. So I'm in the same place, like you said. We're exactly lined up. The World is Hollow is the last episode I watched yesterday. I live here in Philadelphia, so the Phillies in the postseason in the playoffs has kind of slowed me down on weekend nights. And Phillies tend to be playing, so I think it might be allowing us to stay pretty caught with each other. But
Yes.
yeah, I agree with everything you said about season 3. There are some highlights. I think in the first handful of episodes, I think the Enterprise incident's great. I think Day of the Dove's really strong. I think Spectre of the Gun's fun. And I think the only two that really swing and miss for me are Spock's Brain and then The Children Shall Lead. I think they're the only two so far, the first 8, that are like complete misses. So it's not batting.
There's some C+ range episodes in there for sure.
Yeah, I agree. But I think you definitely notice a kind of changing of the guard in the production staff and who's working on the show. I think not in the writing, but even in the behind the scenes stuff. I just feel like it's certainly especially given how limited they were with production, with budget and with time. A lot's been written about season 3 of TOS and all the challenges that the network kind of handed them to get the show done, with a lot of constraints and limitations. But I think those understandably show at times. I think they have a new producer in the 3rd season, kind of calling the shots, and some maybe different directives influencing things like the scores and the tone of the show. I think some of the humor that got really comfortable in the 2nd season when Gene Kuhn was running the show is kind of left. The episodes tend to be much more kind of self-serious again, kind of like they were at the very beginning of the show before Gene Kuhn got there. So TOS is a really interesting show where you can kind of plot like different sections of it based on who's kind of running the show, who the head writer is, and who's got their fingerprints on it, most notably. And season 3 is definitely a unique pool of episodes for all kinds of reasons. But it'll be interesting to kind of track as always as we go through it. We're a third of the way through it, 8 of 24. You had mentioned real quick before we get into Lower Decks, I'm kind of curious because you teased it on our Discord server. Is there in Truth No Beauty, you kind of mentioned as a specific episode that you really enjoyed. And it's kind of another one, kind of like we were talking about a couple weeks ago with season 2. Doesn't get a lot of talk, doesn't get put on a lot of top 10 lists, doesn't get put on a lot of bottom 5, bottom 10 lists either. Kind of in the middle of the pack as far as how the consensus seems to feel about it. And I'm just curious to hear your thoughts since you noted it as something that stood out to you in your rewatch.
So it really played me with. I fell into the trap of. Well, it obviously got me the twist at the end, and but even more, I thought that I fell into the trap that she had been so. Like her character had been so disciplined with like her mind and all, like she's been trained on Vulcan. Like she's like, okay, she can see it, and she's being able to control the effects of what is it, the Medusans?
The Medusans, Kallus.
Which is a cool little which I always forget, a little tie-in to Lower Decks, or not Lower Decks, but Prodigy. But yeah, but I just I don't know. I just really like that. It kind of played with my perspective on the guest star, who's obviously amazing. Yeah, I really enjoyed that one. I wasn't expecting to really enjoy that one, and I think for me it played with my perspective of the guest star. Okay, she's just power hungry. She's trying to I don't know. Is power hungry, trying to keep it away from everybody.
Yeah,
because
kind of insecure
Spock,
in her position.
Yeah, because Spock shows interest in it, and it turns out she's blind, and it's really powerful. She wants to do it on her own without any help, and you kind of work through that. Again, like it's not perfect. Like I feel like there's some overacting with Shatner here and there in it, but. No, I really enjoyed it more than I thought I would, and I remember it definitely. I don't remember the twist at the end, and I think that
Nice.
That's a maybe B minus for me.
That's where I have it. I have it at B minus. I think it's fun and interesting. Um,
I loved her costume design.
Yes.
Her gown. That's so cool. That
Yeah.
is so cool. Yeah.
yeah, I totally agree. I think the character, I think I noted on my review on Twitter, like the character interplay with her, I think is really strong. I think Nimoy is really good. There's some really classic lines that establish Idic, the infinite diversity and infinite combination. That's kind of born in that episode. That symbol is born in that episode. So there's a lot of like kind of Star Trek stuff that comes out of that, including now, like you said, it ties into Prodigy. It kind of establishes the Medusans, that it's not just the Medusans aren't just kind of a wacky TOS season 3 one-off anymore. There's a main character later on who is of that species and gets to do a lot of the things that are alluded to and talked about in Is There in Truth and Beauty too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's an underrated one too. I think it comes down a little bit for me with some of the way that season 3 tends to do, like the space madness with the fisheye lens and the kind of the wacky photography and the kind of on the nose score, the kind of intrusive, like screeching musical choices. They kind of grate on me a little bit. They're of their time, and they're not, not completely disastrous, but they kind of put a little of a ceiling on the episode for me. But there's a lot of really good stuff in it, and I think it's an underrated, meaty, interesting episode to chew on in season 3, where some of the episodes might not have that substantive quality, especially as we get deeper into it. So,
yeah.
Jeff in the chat, who agrees, definitely some good layers in Is There in Truth No Beauty? Good stuff to explore. Absolutely, we agree. I think our next episode is the Tholian Web, which is largely seen as a classic, kind of along with the Enterprise incident. They were the two, when I did the Twitter polls for season 3 of TOS, they were the two kind of runaway favorites, like pretty well out ahead of the rest of the pack. There's another tier below it, things like Day of the Dove and All Our Yesterdays, that are also very, very popular, well-liked episodes. But I think the Tholian Web and the Enterprise incident were the clear favorites of season 3. So I'll be curious to see what you think of that one up next. So I think we should pivot to season 3 of Lower Decks. Can't believe it. It's been 10 weeks. We've got 10 episodes already. It sure did. It always seems to, especially these 10 episode seasons go by in a flash. Interesting season of Star Trek. I think I had an evolving view of it. I feel like maybe the first handful of episodes, I really love the premiere. I think the premiere is really strong. I have that as a completely successful episode. Grounded. I think there's a lot of fun stuff in that. It's big and ambitious, and I think it really uses the big 4 Lower Deckers well as a unit.
Yeah.
I think the handful of episodes immediately following that, like 2, 3, and 4, I think we've talked about offline, and maybe even on our Trek After Dark, was maybe right around the time of these episodes kind of dropping. I think they're okay. I don't think any of them are like disastrously awful, but they're kind of, I don't want to say filler, because they do establish some really key components that pay off later in the season. Like they definitely do. You think about the second episode, with Mariner's kind of position in Starfleet and her relationship with Ransom and the captain, and the pressure that's on her. And in the third episode, you have the sort of budding rivalry with other California-class ships, and how other California-class ships see the Cerritos and the Lower Deckers on the Cerritos. That obviously plays heavy into the finale. Like, so, what felt maybe small and insignificant and uneventful when those episodes aired feels bigger now. So I kind of find myself reevaluating even how I feel about those episodes. So that's kind of where I am. I think in traditional Lower Decks fashion, I think it ended really strong. I think some of those back end, the Crisis Point sequel, is excellent, I think, and probably my favorite of the season. That's what I put on my instant reaction rankings that you can find on Twitter that I'm sure we'll touch on here. And I think the finale's great. They're kind of like my big touch points. Right in the middle, too. I mean, that Reflections is excellent. That really sets up a lot of the finale with Rutherford. Yeah. But yeah, talk a little bit about your kind of highlight points and the kind of broad perspectives on the season.
Yeah, I'll just echo what you're pretty much saying. It's hard. Definitely, some of these earlier episodes are really teeing up a lot of stuff, and so the elements and points in those episodes definitely have changed. At the end of the season, so I think it's not really fair for me to say like, oh, maybe that like that first third of episodes or first half of the season isn't the strongest, when it's like, okay, well, they have to. And we kind of went through this with Discovery a little bit, in more of these serialized shows. It's like it's harder to rank and really have these episodes stand alone, which they definitely do. There are definitely some memorable episodes this season.
Yep.
But, I think there's a little bit of serialization in here, which will make rewatching this season really, really, really strong. I think there's a lot of, just as far as like character development stuff, I think there's some really big developmental stuff, and that just takes time. And I think, I don't know, again, I feel like I preach this every time, but I feel like we need more than just 10 episodes to try to help develop some of these storylines, because I feel like the Rutherford stuff could have been, I mean, we've seen some of those in past seasons, and I think some of the Mariner stuff has been brewing for a while, but I think it would be just even better if we had even more episodes. So, yeah. And it's not like they're opposed to adding more episodes. I just think because with Prodigy technically breaking up the season, definitely brings up some interesting questions. But as far as Lower Decks goes, I just I think some of the middle of the pack episodes definitely suffer from just teeing things up.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I feel like Lower Decks, especially, I think because of the nature of the show, in contrast, I remember talking about this when we were doing Trek After Dark a few weeks ago offline of what we normally do here on Trek Live, but like having to calibrate myself a little bit after Discovery and Picard and even Strange New Worlds, where the stakes are so high every week that the individual episodes, if you're looking at, the stakes in like the third episode of the season, when they're kind of racing another California class ship to complete an away mission, it feels really small in a vacuum, and that's kind of the point, and not to punish the show for sticking true to its premise and being the counterpoint to some of these the live action shows that deal with high stakes and much heavier material. But like you said, I think when you look at the season as a whole, experiencing some of those episodes as they aired when it was a storyline in progress is a different experience than seeing it as a whole when it's all done, and seeing how they do kind of build into the kind of ultimate story of the season and how the character development plays out. So it's an interesting phenomenon. I definitely noticed myself tweaking my rankings and how I kind of situate the episodes and how I feel about them, not just in terms of like how do they stack against each other, but how do my perspectives on them change as the season plays out for this show. I think the character development has been really strong this season. I think all four of the Lower Deckers are kind of put in similar positions where they're really kind of having to self-evaluate their kind of position and what they want in their career and how they see themselves. It's really how they see themselves to me. Like you think about Tendi and how she is kind of self-conscious about her Orion roots and how she wants to be perceived and how that affects her career path, and how that, the perspectives on Orion culture from others, and even other Orions in the Deep Space Nine episode, influence her own like self-confidence and how she presents herself. Obviously, Rutherford's struggle with his identity and this kind of blind spot in who he is, and that kind of gets unraveled throughout the end of this season. A lot of attention and reflections, which is an excellent episode, I think. The bold Boimler stuff, having to kind of challenge himself to not say no to things and be risk averse, and how that's kind of influenced his career track. And of course, Mariner's kind of comfort zone with being in Starfleet, and is that her place or not, has kind of long been. That's the thing. Like this season, I feel like all four of those arcs are not new developments in any way. Like these are things that have been there since the beginning of the show and are very kind of like hallmark character traits for all four of them. But this season has done a lot of work to enhance those things and move them forward. And there are movements for those characters that are specific to season 3 that I think will allow that season to stand on its own as far as the character development of the big four goes. I think they did a lot of good work on those 4 characters.
Yeah, that's definitely true, because if you think about, I feel like Mariner's been always struggling since the very beginning. Boimler has like the transporter accident thing that kind of spirals him into trying to figure out, and that was a long time ago. And so I guess you're right. It just takes time and to see these characters develop and to see where they're going to go, because the show is Lower Decks. So are we going to stay in the Lower Decks, or are we going to move up the ranks, or how are we feeling?
It's a good question.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know how quickly. I mean, that's the thing. Like these characters are making their mark as the show goes on. Like they have roles. Boimler's sitting at the con on the bridge at a couple of key points, and Mariner gets involved in some big moments for obvious reasons.
Cindy's trying to do science officer stuff.
So it definitely calls into question at some point, when do they become like lieutenant, junior grade, and how does that shift the perspective of the show? I don't think it needs to. I think it still can be. I mean, Lower Decks is like a journey. Like we start with them as Lower Deckers, and we're seeing them evolve into more confident, honed officers. I think that can still be the backbone of the show. I think I wouldn't feel. I hope that they don't feel like that it has to be The Simpsons. That maybe the show runs for a long, long time, but the characters never really change their place. They don't age, they don't change. Everything around them changes. You go back and watch an episode from 1991 in The Simpsons, and like the cultural references and things are all of 1991, but Homer and Marge and kids are the exact same as they are in a 2022 episode, with just the cultural references changing. Like I hope that the show doesn't take that approach. I want them to, and I suspect they will. I mean, they've put such an emphasis on character development and having them not be static in their place. But,
1 second.
Yep. Okay. So I'll just continue to touch on my own kind of thoughts on the character development. I think the bridge crew also, in limited time, got a lot of good stuff as well. I think Captain Freeman is, to me, obviously the biggest of maybe those 4 bridge crew characters. As the captain and as the character with the most direct tie to one of the Lower Deckers in Mariner. But I think she gets a pretty solid arc. I think if you look at her in Grounded, being in trouble and in hot water, and kind of see her at the end, standing up for herself and for the mission of her ship and her crew is a nice journey to kind of see play out too. I think Captain Freeman's kind of evolved into a really strong character in her own right, and has a pretty good stamp on kind of the personality and the identity of Lower Decks series. Dawn Lewis is a really good voice actress who is very present in a lot of the Star Trek events and things that they have throughout the year. She's often a good spokesman for the show, and I like that she's getting such heavy material and quality stuff as well. I do wish we got a little more Shax and a little more Dr. T'Ana, especially. I've seen it talked about quite a bit over the last.
Real quick.
No problem. I covered. One of the things I've seen mentioned on online a few times is Dr. T'Ana kind of suffering maybe a little bit from Tendi moving away from the medical field and being on her own, and through the science officer kind of avenue of Starfleet kind of pushes her away from Dr. T'Ana a little much, and creates less opportunities for that character. And I hope they find a way to integrate her more into some stories. I think she's really funny and in a very specific way. So yeah, but yeah, I guess the big elephant in the room, according to our thumbnail here.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, what were you gonna say?
One more positive.
Sure,
I like
of course.
I don't know if you talked about it, but I like the exploration of what it means to be in Starfleet, and what it is different there's different experiences in Starfleet, but also like different branches experience different things in Starfleet. So I think there's the I forget the episode where they have to do the pop-up tent. I think that's a really fun Reflections. Yeah, I really like that. Just the positives of Starfleet, and then but on the flip side, sometimes Starfleet's tough, and we get like this engineering retreats and in some of these episodes. So I think that not just this season, but I think the whole show, I guess, is positive of like this is a good representation of what it means to be in Starfleet. So
really, I think it diversifies Starfleet a lot as an experience, like as a career track. And the big live action shows that we've gotten up to this point kind of all present like the peak of kind of Starfleet. Characters that have kind of arrived, and they're on the Enterprise, they're on Voyager, they're serving on Deep Space Nine, really important outpost. You kind of get the sense that they're the best of the best, really key, important jobs. But there's always like people I think have always naturally wondered like what else is out there. And Starfleet's a huge organization with thousands and thousands and thousands of people and assignments and kinds of duties. And Lower Decks, I think, has done a really nice job of fleshing that out and showing us that there are kind of levels here, and that there's camaraderie in the lower. Not just it's like it's grown beyond just. And that's kind of the other thing. It's not just the lower decks on the ship. It's not just like the four ensigns. It's the California class and the Cerritos are kind of like the lower decks of Starfleet. They're not in that elite level of, explore strange new worlds, seek out new life and new civilizations. Like that's not their ask. That's not their duty. They're asked to do more menial kinds of tasks, but important work and things that need to happen. And I think it's been a really cool way to flesh out Starfleet. And it's been a welcome change.
Yes.
A major talking point this season, if you engage in Star Trek discourse on Twitter, on Facebook, which is a dicier place to be for Star Trek talk, but a mathematically perfect redemption, the Peanut Hamper episode, is one of the more discussed, polarizing, interesting episodes to think about, talk about in recent Star Trek history for sure. And I think we're both kind of on the record, at least with each other, with how we feel about it. There are a lot of Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3 rankings floating around on Twitter in the last couple of days. Understandably, I put mine out. Trek Ranks put theirs out, and people are, commenting and sharing their own. And it's been interesting to see the divergence for that. You see it ranging from the middle of the pack to upper levels to at the bottom. And I've got it at the bottom of mine. I suspect it's probably at the bottom of yours, Space
It's at the
Gundam.
very bottom of mine. Yes,
Yeah.
probably the bottom of the series, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, it's really an interesting case. I'm really glad that they did it. I mean, I want them to be bold and not be constrained by formula. And you know, I think they've talked about it as sort of a, you know, my favorite episode of the series is Wage Dues, the three ships, which is similarly a big, ambitious swing away from the format and focusing on
Not our original crew. Yeah,
Nope.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a third of that episode belongs to a Vulcan officer who we haven't seen again up until the last couple minutes of the finale. Kind of teeing up, maybe she'll be a bigger part of season 4, which is very welcome and awesome. There's a Klingon officer taking up a third of that episode, and then we have our own characters for just about a third of that episode. And that's widely praised as, you know, not just one of the best episodes of Lower Decks, if the best. I think consensus would probably put it, you know, if we polled it, it would be right up there in the top 2 or 3 at the lowest. But one of people's generally favorite episodes of new Star Trek, like since 2017, I think I've seen polls, you know, people asking and over the last couple of years, you know, what's your favorite episode of new Trek? And Wage Dues gets picked like a good bit, and that goes to show you, like, you can get that or you can get the Peanut Hamper episode, which is, you know, largely seen as maybe not quite as successful. So I'm glad that they took the ambitious swing and broke from the formula and are not afraid to try different things. But man, it didn't. We don't like to dwell in the negative here, but it didn't work for me at all. I love that it did for some people. I'm glad that it's not just, and the children shall lead, it's not quite as simplistic as that. We're just, generally speaking, everybody's got it at the bottom of theirs or in the bottom handful. You know, there are people out there who defend it and have, you know, valid points of view that that are different than mine. I think that's great, but I wasn't into it.
Yeah, neither was I. I definitely will echo your sentiment. I like when Lower Decks takes swings. I like when Star Trek takes swings. There's a particular short trek that I'm not too fond of. That's not. I mean, it's way different, but it's still like on that humor side of things as far as a humor episode.
Yeah.
So I'm not a fan of it as well. I appreciate that again, there is some very interesting discussions online as far as where it ranks, the humor, how it lands, things like that. For me, it doesn't land. I always have problems when, you know, a culture gets infiltrated and interrupted and break the prime directive and all these things, and that's one of these episodes. So it's not, I'm not just, you know, picking on this one little lonely animated episode. I against things in this episode that are in other episodes as well. So just not a fan of it.
I think it really hinges on, you know, the conceit of that episode is really built around let's like make the central character of the episode like a contemptible, completely anti-Starfleet, anti-hero, you know, terrible person, in quotes, an exocomp. And I think your mileage will vary on how you can kind of get behind that and the enjoyment factor that you kind of get out of following Peanut Hamper and kind of going along for that ride. The episode does try to sell us, because there's a twist that you kind of think they're trying to sell us on, is Peanut Hamper making a turn and kind of trying to do better, and and she's not, and that's, you know, I think a lot of people, if you can accept that and have fun with diving into such a non what we're used to kind of lead character, that it might work for you. I did not. I just, if we never saw Peanut Hamper again, I'd be okay.
Very happy. And it's tough because especially when you're working with an exo comp, like you're just asking to bring in the old guard, the old TNG guard, and that's just asking for people to rip on it. So I just, yeah, I too echo. I would be happy if we never saw
Yeah.
that again.
It's gonna be interesting to see. I mean, I'm sure they know like what the reaction to it was and how. But depending on it's not universal hate. I mean, I can't sit here and say that like the world thinks it's the worst episode ever. There are folks who strongly believe that, but there are folks who kind of really defend it, and I think that opens the door. I can't imagine that Mike McMahon and company are like afraid to go back to it because it was polarizing and it shook people up.
No.
I think that crew and that production team, if anything, like that kind of reaction is going to make them want to. So I suspect I won't get my wish. I think we'll see more at some point down the road.
Because that's the tough thing. Because it is a very polarizing episode, but I think it gets people talking about the show. And I think as in my book, the episode is not successful, but it's a successful in that in this day and age where staying relevant on social media and things like that are important for a show's success. I feel like you have to have something like this, which we've had episodes in the past like this, even in Lower Decks. So I don't think this is going away.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was definitely noticeable. The level of discourse and the passion of that kind of that week long discussion of that episode was more intense than the average episode, I would say, and I'm sure they noticed that too.
Yeah, I would even say, even like the Deep Space Nine episode, like is it more talked about and more relevant than the Deep Space Nine episode?
In some ways, I think it is. I'd be interested to like see their data, like what episode generated the most.
Yes, buzz.
I'd be surprised if it wasn't. The finale, the premiere always generate a lot, but the Peanut Hamper episode had to be up there.
Definitely.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite episode of the season?
It's close, but I'd probably have to say Crisis Point 2.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just edges out, at least for me, Cure All, Trust Nothing.
Okay.
I do like the going back to the Deep Space Nine, the Beloved Station,
sure,
and having our two kind of main characters take a back seat a little bit, and then again play with some, our stereotypes, I guess, in some of these species. But yeah, it just Crisis Point just really has everything. Like it has some like emotional aspects to it.
Yeah.
It has some great, really really funny, like actually laugh out loud stuff. So yeah, I think it's really Lower Decks in a nutshell. It has like the emotional punch, the weight that most Star Trek episodes have, but it also has some really great humor stuff and great friendship moments and really wholesome stuff in it. Just like, I wouldn't say, I don't know, that's maybe a discussion for another day, but which Crisis Point do you prefer? Maybe we can talk about that a little bit in another episode. But yeah, Crisis Point for sure. Here, I'll Trust Nothing 2, Reflections. Bill and I talked about the Starfleet booth episode, I think, and Grounded for me, number 4, and then the Stars at 5. That's my top 5.
Great.
Really quickly, so we'd have something to talk about.
Yeah, that's cool. We have the same 5 in a little bit of a different order. I think, off the top of my head, I definitely have Crisis Point 2 as my number 1. I think that unexpected. Like I didn't expect the Crisis Point sequel, but I think they did a really nice job of kind of taking that same concept, being self-conscious about it, and having it just kind of point to Boimler instead of Mariner. The big thing with Crisis Point the first time was that it was kind of a way to really dive deep into Mariner's, self-image and how she sees herself, and she's at a kind of crossroads in her career and where she wants to be in life. And Crisis Point 2 kind of does the same thing for Boimler, trying to come to terms with what's kind of the point of all this, which I think a lot of us can relate to at especially the early point of our careers. Like, what do we want out of this whole thing, and where do we want to be, and what feels good and what doesn't. I think seeing Boimler go through all that was really kind of cathartic, and it's kind of the perfect way to engineer situations and references that are so direct to like being self-consciously Star Trek stuff, without feeling as, the show does a really nice job of not feeling shoehorned with Easter eggs and references. I think they found their comfort zone with having that be the personality of the show and part of what they do. But the Crisis Point episodes just allow them to kind of go for broke with that. And
because on the holodeck, like these junior officers, they can do like the most outlandish, biggest, most epic things.
Yeah,
if they want to.
And these lower deckers on especially a California class ship have heard stories about the Enterprise and like the legendary characters. And to me, I totally buy that they would idolize the Enterprise D and the Enterprise E and those characters and the kinds of missions that the best of the best that the shows have followed the same way that we do. So they want to recreate it just the way we would. So that just, it all adds up, and it creates situations where they can just swing for the fences with those references. I love there's like a bit in that where they talk about, even the lesser missions or the lesser episodes or however they put it are still funny and still worth going for because they're Starfleet, they're Star Trek. That's such a Star Trek fan kind of perspective on doing all that. So it's to me it's just loaded with good stuff, and it has the perfect sauce of everything: the Easter eggs, the references, the self-awareness, but also major substance for the character development of not just Stephen Boimler, who's kind of the central focus of it, but Tendy's got some big moments in it. She's taking it serious and kind of seeing it as a way to test herself, and it kind of backs her into a corner where she's forced to admit, like, she wants to be a captain, she wants to advance and be taken seriously. And so I think that's a big moment for her. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in Crisis Point too. Makes it a major highlight for me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I love that we get like something like this. Like, I feel like in a lot of comedy and sitcoms, we get like a Crisis Point, like a type of episode where it's like, this is a Crisis Point type of episode. Like, I don't know. There's dozens of examples, but
sure.
Yeah, and I really love that. I totally buy. Like, I like that this, just like our Enterprise D crew is going into the holodeck and doing things with each other. This crew is doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
yeah, all that works. Reflections is my number 2. For me, I think even enhanced by the finale, not just by the payoff of the Rutherford, mystery, but I was a little less hot on some of the recruitment booth stuff. I love the idea of the recruitment booth in Reflections. I think that's a really fun idea, and I think they get a lot of good mileage out of some of those jokes. But I wasn't as like that's such a highlight. But I think what they did with paying off that archaeologist, and that there's a payoff to that. That's not just kind of a one-off side character. Enhances that, makes it even more important. So that episode's kind of loaded with key developments, and is a really important milestone right at the midway point of the season that tees up a lot of what's coming after. But it's not just teeing up, like we were talking about earlier. Sometimes these episodes kind of are the main purpose of them sometimes feels like ahead of. This sound like a criticism, but I don't really mean it that way. Like the best assets of the episode is setting up things that are going to come down the pike more so than like the individual story of that week. But Reflections, I think, has its cake and eats it too. It's setting up a lot of what's coming and how the season's going to resolve. But I think the situation that Rutherford finds himself in is like a classic Star Trek conceit, like going into his own head and dealing with his identity issues and his split personality. That's such a Star Trek kind of hallmark with characters like Spock and people who deal with like half of this, half of that, and having to deal with what kind of wins out and how to work them both together and all that. Like seeing Rutherford go through that just felt so classically Star Trek to me. And
And seeing the Delta Flyer, right?
Delta Flyers and that, yeah, it's great stuff.
Right?
Yeah, it's just really great on a lot of levels. So they're really high for me. I think Deep Space Nine episode's really fun too, for all the obvious reasons. I think going back to Deep Space Nine is such a big moment for Star Trek in general. Seeing Kira, seeing Quark. I think it was a really bold choice and a cool idea to, like you said, give Tendi and Rutherford kind of more of the spotlight there. I think Mariner and Boimler are kind of relegated to, some side plots that are a little less emphasized. And we get a Quark story. Like it feels like a classic Deep Space Nine, Quark trying to cut a deal and getting himself into hot water, kind of a little extra Deep Space Nine through Lower Decks that feels perfectly at home in Deep Space Nine. It feels like it could easily be an episode from season 3 of DS9, Quark's story at least. So yeah, that's a really strong episode, and I think that'll age well and be seen as kind of a major, hallmark crossover kind of a thing. Yeah.
Because I like Deep Space Nine getting its day in the sun.
Yeah.
Because at this point, I feel like we haven't had as many references as TNG stuff, and even TOS. Like we get like a finale is pretty much a retelling of the Ultimate Computer.
Yeah.
And that's a TOS episode. So it's really nice to see Deep Space Nine get some love.
Very much so. Yeah, definitely. That's the biggest thing about it to me is that Deep Space Nine's definitely kind of gotten the short end of the stick a little bit with getting that pulled back out as the legacy entity. Like, obviously it's Seven of Nine and all the stuff in Voyager, Janeway and Prodigy. Like, Voyager's gotten a lot of love. TNG's obviously gotten a lot. But Enterprise and Voyager.
Deep Space Nine show.
Yeah. Yep. Enterprise and Deep Space Nine have definitely kind of had the least. Enterprise, understandably, it's more difficult given its place in the continuity. But Deep Space Nine, I'm glad to see getting a little bit of a spotlight.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Closing impressions of?
Sad to see it go. I really enjoyed the Lower Decks. Even if it was 27 minutes or 23 minutes, or whatever it was, every week, it was just nice to have Star Trek on every week, and it's hard because we've been so spoiled, and it's almost when it's not there, I miss it. But I guess we have Prodigy.
We have Prodigy now, and I thought their first episode back was really good too. We've talked a lot about. I feel like I don't remember where it started, but we've talked a lot about like how crappy it would be to be a lone officer on some relay station somewhere out.
And
they did it.
Yeah,
and
they did it.
And that job.
It's exactly what you expect.
Yeah.
It's very quirky, Yeah.
Yep. The job appears to suck. The officer who's in that job also sucks, and it goes exactly as you would expect. But yeah, I was pretty happy with that return. I thought that was a good episode. Really nice little flashback moment with Janeway and Chakotay that hit home for me. I thought that was really well done. And interesting to see, hear those two voices interacting, and Prodigy's it's being the two animated series, they are so different. Like the production of the two shows just could not be more polar opposite. I love Lower Decks for what it is, and all its strengths are amazing, and I'm sad to see it go away for a year. I really enjoyed it this season. Prodigy, the animation, the score, like all that stuff is just like next level great stuff, and it really works well. And I think we're going to get a lot more like Star Trek feeling stuff this group of 10 just by seeing the Dauntless and that crew. That Andorian first officer for Admiral Janeway looks really cool. He sounds awesome. Daveed Diggs is the voice actor from Hamilton, and he's in a really great little indie movie called Blind Spotting that I recommend people check out. He's freaking awesome in that. He's a good actor, and really cool to see him on board. And it's just I'm on board with that. I'm excited to see what they do, and it sounds like unless they pull out the rug, the next 10 weeks will be Prodigy. I think we should they put out the 10 episode titles. That usually is a pretty good indicator that they're just going to run right through if they're putting that out that fast. So that'll take us to the end of the year. I put something out on Twitter earlier this week. Assuming they do that and they go to the end of the year, that's 51 episodes in 52 weeks, which is kind of nuts. Yeah. The one thing I've asked a couple people, I haven't asked you, and I guess maybe we'll end on this just as like a little side point. How do you feel about like this week? If that's going to be the case, 51 episodes in 52 weeks, because of the various times that they've doubled up, just like this week. Do you like that creates these little breaks like we just had? Like, do you want little mini hiatuses and to have the double ups, or do you want them to do like truly 51 episodes in 52 weeks, like where they just do one a week and it's just the full year? Like, do you have a preference on that? Like, how do you feel about the way they're doing it that way?
I like the break. I think it's just like I don't want to have like. My insecure fan in me just doesn't want them to bite off more than they can chew and burn it out. Like I as much as I complain about more episodes and all these things, I guess I'm happy with the mold right now. Mm-hmm. I like the discussion that it creates with who won the week. Mm-hmm. I like that transitional period. Like you don't have to watch, And to me, it's like it's different with Prodigy because we're not starting a new season. Mm-hmm. We're starting like just the second half of the season, so it's like it's not a true.
It kind of is. It feels like it. Yeah. They can call it what they want, but it kind of felt like It feels like a fresh.
Yeah, but no, I like the overlap, and I'm fine with breaks.
I
think. Even when we get back into live action, I know they like to break up the season a little bit. I'm fine with that. Maybe 1 week. Mm-hmm. More than that, maybe sometimes just kill some momentum So I'm fine with it. I'm not surfing that magic 52 and 52. Mm-hmm. I'm fine with taking 6 weeks off here, a week off here. Yeah.
I'm mostly fine with it too. I wouldn't mind it being every week and just spreading it out. Like, I'm not opposed to that. But I do. My bigger pet peeve is like I don't want them to do what they did. I think what they did to Prodigy in its first season really sucked. Like, I don't want them. Like, 10 episodes is short enough. Like, don't break it up and do little mini groups of 5. I think that was not a service to that show. I think that hurt that show in its inception and its first impression. I think don't break the seasons up for more than a very brief time, and don't interweave them the way that they did. They kind of did Discovery and then Prodigy and then Discovery and then Prodigy. I think that's lame. I hope they don't do that ever again. I think I don't know if it's ever been confirmed that Prodigy needed more time and it was like a production reason more than like a CBS Paramount Plus kind of marketing choice to do it that way. Whatever it was, I hope they avoid being in that position to need to do that again. The only issue I have with the doubling up, I think the way they did it this week, where it's like the end of a season, the beginning of a season, end of Picard, beginning of Strange New Worlds kind of did it too. I think that's fine for the most part. I do think it creates a situation sometimes where one of the episodes kind of gets short shrift. I do like being able to post which show won the week this week, which of the 2 episodes did you prefer. I think that's cool and fun. But I remember the week that Picard season 2 premiered with a really great episode. Stargazer, I think, is a really strong, one of the better episodes of Picard as a whole, and was really well received, airing like the same night as episode 11 of season 4 of Discovery, kind of a mid-season episode. That's good. I think it's a solid episode. Rosetta. I think that kind of did Discovery dirty that week a little bit. With it's like kind of an unfair comparison. And
I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think you're right. I think, and not just Discovery. Like, I feel like we should try to prop up Prodigy and have it stand alone as best we can, because there is some really great stuff. Like, it's not just a kids show. No. It's not just this new crew. Janeway is in an EV suit with her crew, searching and trying to solve a problem. That's Star Trek.
Looking
So
for
I feel
Chakotay. That's Star Trek.
Yeah. So, but like you said, like, how are you supposed to go up against, I don't know, like a season premiere like Stargazer? Like, that's tough.
It's not fair. I mean, I think they should be careful with that. I don't mind. I do find myself. I think little breaks, maybe not 6 weeks, but there's a mushy middle there. I think a few weeks off to get a breather, maybe digest one of the shows, digest a recently finished season is good, and certainly nothing wrong with that. I don't have a problem with them doubling up here or there strategically to allow little breaks in the calendar year.
I think they should break around like Star Trek Las Vegas and then the convention, because I think those would be good times.
Yeah,
good break.
Yeah,
that's just me.
It's a fair idea there. It sounds like, I mean, if they do this, if they run Prodigy all the way to the end, which I'm afraid what they're going to do, which I guess is fine. I suspect they're going to break around Christmas. I don't know that it's going to be 10 straight weeks. I have a feeling that there might be a little, because Picard's scheduled to begin in mid-February. I think if they break a little bit around Christmas, around the halfway point, and they skip ahead a couple weeks, they can end Prodigy right around the time that Picard ends, or begins. I suspect. I'm not going to be totally surprised if they do that.
Because Christmas is on a Sunday, so it's not really in that. It's not really like that Thursday isn't really in the vicinity. But I get what you're saying with the trying to butt up the two shows.
4 or 5. Yeah, like if they do 5 and 5, the 5th episode of the season is going to air on Thanksgiving, the 24th, which Star Trek has done a couple times now. Discovery's put out on Thanksgiving a number of times at this point, because it tends to be a fall show. So that gives 5 more weeks. They went away in December and came back in January. They could run right up to Picard, within a week or two. I wouldn't be shocked if they do something like that. I kind of hope they don't. I'd like them to just give Prodigy a 10-week run, let it build some momentum, let people get into it, and give it its time in the sun, and then use the beginning of the year and that 6-week ramp up to Picard. That's going to be a big deal. Use that to give that show its ramp up time and get people pumped about it in its own lane. I hope that's what they do, but only one way to find out. We just got to wait and see, and wait for the press releases that give release dates and air dates and stuff. So cool.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, well, head over to Twitter and look for all the various episode rankings that you can back into by accident that are floating around out there this week, and share your own if you have them. We're definitely eager to hear what you think of that group of 10 episodes, season 3 of Lower Decks. Our Discord server is another place that is sitting there ready to be used, share stuff like that. If you're interested in joining a modest but well-populated and positive Star Trek community, the Trek Live Discord server is a place for you. You can DM me on Twitter, TrekFan4387, and I will get you on board and in a position to friends and have those person-to-person kinds of interactions. We'll be doing, hopefully, our next Trek After Dark, which is our reference to it a couple times today, a kind of casual hangout with that community, not streaming it anywhere, just kind of low-key, watch episodes, talk about what's going on in the world of Star Trek and our own lives, getting to know each other. Probably a couple of years now, we've done it around the new year, after Christmas, right around New Year's Day, maybe beginning of January. Which, if they do what I'm saying, I hope they do with wrapping Picard or wrapping Prodigy at the end of the year, that would be a nice time to do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Flash holiday party. Yeah. I want to thank everybody for watching. I'm excited for 2 weeks. Got a great topic lined up. Great few topics lined up, I think. And thank everybody for watching. Check Twitter, check Discord server. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, everybody.